They said the franchise was dead. They said Hollywood had finally killed it. They said no one was ever going to care about giant robots fighting on a big screen again. And then something happened behind closed doors at Paramount that nobody saw coming. Transformers 8 is real. It is happening. And the details that just surfaced are not the desperate Hail Mary of a dying franchise. They are the calculated moves of a studio that knows exactly what it lost and is now spending serious money to get it back. But here is the part that makes this story genuinely complicated. Because Paramount is not just throwing one writer at this problem. They are throwing multiple writers at it simultaneously, running competing visions against each other, and letting the best idea win. That is either the sign of a studio with a bold creative strategy, or a studio so lost it is hoping someone, anyone, will accidentally find the answer. By the end of this, you will know which one it actually is. To understand what is really happening with Transformers right now, you have to go back to what this franchise actually was at its peak. Because people forget just how enormous it used to be. Michael Bay's original Transformers films were not just movies. They were cultural events. Revenge of the Fallen pulled $409 million domestically in 2009 alone. Dark of the Moon crossed $1 billion worldwide. Age of Extinction crossed $1 billion worldwide. For a window of nearly a decade, the Transformers franchise sat at the very top of Hollywood's food chain, right alongside Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean, and the Spider-Man trilogy. It was one of the most reliable money-printing machines the industry had ever seen, and then it collapsed. The last night in 2017 earned just $131 million domestically and failed to crack $1 billion worldwide. A catastrophic drop for a franchise that had been generating those numbers in its sleep. Bumblebee did better with critics in 2018. A genuinely heartfelt film that proved these characters could carry emotional weight. But it still only landed $471 million on a budget that made those numbers uncomfortable. Rise of the Beast in 2023 managed $429 million worldwide, which sounds decent until you measure it against where this franchise used to live. And then came 2024's Transformers 1, the animated prequel that the people who actually saw it called one of the best entries in the entire franchise. A film that was smart, emotionally grounded, and genuinely cinematic. It made $128 million worldwide, the lowest number in franchise history, and Paramount looked at those results, felt the ground shifting underneath them, and made a decision. They were not going to let this franchise die quietly. They were going to fight for it. So here is what is actually happening right now, and this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. Jason Fuchs has been tapped to write an untitled Transformers script for Paramount and Hasbro. The plot details are being kept under wraps, which makes sense given how early this is. But what matters is not the secrecy. What matters is who Jason Fuchs actually is. His films have grossed over $1.9 billion combined. He wrote Wonder Woman, the first one, which was not just a hit but a genuine piece of superhero cinema that people still go back to. He co-created and co-showran HBO's It, Welcome to Derry, which earned the kind of critical praise that most franchise writers spend entire careers chasing. He is currently writing a live-action My Hero Academia feature for Netflix. He just launched his own production company. This is not a writer Hollywood calls when it needs a body to fill a seat. This is a writer Hollywood calls when it needs someone to make people care again. And caring is exactly what the Transformers franchise has been missing. But Fuchs is not working alone. Derek Connelly, who wrote Jurassic World, is simultaneously developing a G.I. Joe and Transformers crossover film at Paramount. Two writers, two separate scripts, two completely different visions for where this franchise goes next. The studio is essentially running a competition, feeding multiple approaches to a problem they know is real, and waiting to see which one catches fire. That is bold, or it is desperate. Sometimes in Hollywood, those two things look identical from the outside. Here is what makes this moment genuinely complicated, and what nobody covering this story seems to want to sit with honestly. Paramount needs this to work, not creatively, financially. The studio is potentially staring down enormous debt as a major deal continues to develop. and Transformers is one of the most valuable IP addresses they own. They need a blockbuster. They need something that can get back to $1 billion worldwide. And they need it to land correctly the first time, because another failure at this scale is not a setback. It is a franchise funeral. That pressure changes how you read every decision being made right now. Michael Bay is producing instead of directing, which is a significant signal. Bay's Transformers films were events because they were unapologetically, almost aggressively, exactly what they were. Loud, enormous, chaotic, spectacular. They were not trying to be prestige cinema, and they never pretended otherwise. And audiences responded to that honesty with $1 billion per film. Bay, behind the camera as a producer rather than a director, suggests Paramount wants his institutional knowledge without necessarily committing to his visual language. Which raises the obvious question: who actually directs this? The answer that makes the most creative sense is Travis Knight. He directed Bumblebee. He gave the franchise its best reviewed film. He proved these characters could carry genuine emotional weight without needing to demolish 17 city blocks to hold an audience's attention. His most recent project, Masters of the Universe, was a creative success that struggled at the box office. But anyone who actually watched that film saw a director who understood how to make people love characters that most of the industry had written off as nostalgia, toys. That is exactly the skill set this moment requires. But here's the real question underneath all of this. The one that determines whether Transformers 8 becomes a genuine comeback or just another chapter in a slow decline. Does Paramount know what this franchise is actually supposed to be? Because right now, every major property in Hollywood is reaching for the same answer to that question. Nostalgia. The Mummy is being revived. Pirates of the Caribbean is reportedly returning with Johnny Depp. The original Avengers are reassembling with Robert Downey Jr. stepping back into the universe. The Fox X-Men are being woven back into Marvel continuity. The industry has collectively decided that the safest creative bet is the familiar face, the remembered feeling, the emotional connection that audiences already built with something they loved years ago. Nostalgia sells. That is simply a fact of this moment in cinema. So the choice Paramount faces is stark. Path 1. They go all in on bringing back Shia LaBeouf, bringing back Megan Fox, rebuilding the Sam Witwicky story from where it left off, and betting that the audience who grew up with those films will show up out of love for what they remember. Path 2. They walk away from all of it entirely. Full reboot, clean slate. Humans meet Autobots for the first time again. Discovery built from scratch. A new story with no obligation to honor the continuity of what came before. The dangerous middle. The soft continuation that tries to acknowledge what existed while moving forward is where franchises go to die slowly. It satisfies nobody completely and gives everyone just enough to be disappointed by. Fuchs' track record suggests he is a story-first writer, someone who thinks about character before spectacle. If Paramount gives him the room to actually write the film that Jason Fuchs is capable of writing, Transformers 8 could be the reset this franchise genuinely needs. If they interfere, if they demand the explosions before the script is ready, if they let the financial pressure override the creative process, then we will have seen this story before and we already know how it ends. Here is what this moment actually comes down to. The Transformers franchise is not dead. It is wounded. And a wounded franchise with the right writer, the right director, and a studio willing to make one genuinely brave creative decision is not finished. It is one good film away from being completely alive again. Bumblebee proved that audiences will respond to these characters when someone treats them with real care. Transformers 1 proved that the mythology has depth that most of the live-action films barely scratched. Jason Fuchs proves that Paramount is at least trying to hire someone who can access that depth. The question is not whether Transformers 8 gets made. It is getting made. The question is whether everyone involved has the courage to make it great, instead of just making it big. Because big without great is exactly what got this franchise into the position it is in right now. And the audience that walked away, they did not stop loving Transformers. They stopped trusting that Transformers would love them back. That is the only thing Jason Fuchs Travis Knight, Michael Bay, Steven Spielberg. And everyone else attached to this project actually needs to fix. Everything else is just robots.